Hi, my name is Alexa Romagnolo,
And my name is Deborah Rubin.
and we're going to be talking about Shell Oil's campaign in Nigeria. So, a little bit about Shell. They are a global group of energy and petrochemical companies with an average of 92,000 employees in more than 70 countries. Their global headquarters are in The Hague, the Netherlands. The parent company is Royal Dutch Shell, and that was formed in 1907. Their current CEO is Ben van Beurden, and in Nigeria, Shell produces about half of the country's entire oil production. So they're a pretty prominent company in Nigeria and have a large influence on the global community. Continuing more about Shell, their mission is we aim to meet the energy needs of society in ways that are economically, socially, and environmentally viable now and in the future. Their vision is that they believe that oil and gas will remain a vital part of the global energy mix for many decades to come. Our role is to ensure that we extract and deliver these energy resources profitably and in environmentally and socially responsible ways. And their main values are honesty, integrity, and respect for people. Shell's campaign was a crisis management campaign that was set into motion in response to its tarnished reputation in Nigeria. So, Shell operations in Nigeria had been environmentally destructive, with several gas flares and oil spills damaging the land and communities. People who resided in these oil producing areas became angry. Formed under Ken Saro-Wiwa, a group called the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People attacked Shell facilities and staff and called for change. Shell repeatedly denied involvement in environmental pollution and turned to the government for intervention, which further tarnished its reputation. So they had to make a public relations campaign to restore their reputation. So this is the SWOT of Shell. Their strengths are that they had an organized and well-known website. They had an international presence that gave them a large platform to speak from, and they had good internal communication and relationships with its employees, which ended up being a big help for them in this campaign. Their weaknesses were that it had poor communication with its publics, which was why a lot of the local Nigerians thought that Shell was working together with the government to accomplish the government's agenda rather than working for the people. Shell had environmentally destructive operations. Like I said, the gas flares and the oil spills were damaging the local communities and the land. Then they had failure to take ownership of its role in environmental pollution. So Shell just kept denying that they were involved in the destruction happening to the land, and that really hurt their reputation. So Shell's opportunities were that they had a good relationship with the Nigerian government, which was a little tricky because the public saw this as a bad thing, but it ended up being a good thing because the government helped them to put out some fires that when the local Nigerians would attack and stuff, the police would help to kind of quell those things. And then they had a large network of Shell ambassadors in local communities in Nigeria, which was a good way that they could spread the word of their campaign once it started. And they had a powerful commercial position. So Shell produces the majority of oil in Nigeria and employs 4,700 Nigerians. And the company's actions affect the daily lives of the communities. So they didn't have to work to get a lot of influence over the Nigerian people. They already had that. The threats were violent protesters. They tarnished Shell's image and forced them to recall staff and halt operations, and they just kept attacking. Growing competition, there were 5 other major oil-producing companies in Nigeria. MOSSUP is the organization that started under Ken Saro-Wiwa and his followers who wanted a share of the oil extracted from their land and wanted compensation. And then there were worldwide campaigns against Shell. Greenpeace and Amnesty International made these campaigns against Shell for their environmentally destructive practices. So Nigeria's political system is a federal republic with a presidential system, and you can see the hierarchy on the right, how that kind of works. That's their political hierarchy. Nigeria is partly free. It's, as you can see in the graphic. Their corruption perception index, their rank is 148, and their score is 27 out of 100. So with the scale of 0 being the most corrupt and 100 being the least, 27 ranks them more on the corrupt side. So that is a large part of their culture. So Nigeria's economic environment is, they are a developing economy. Their main export is oil, which is why this campaign is such a big deal, and Shell's involvement in the country is so important. They're developing, but as oil prices rise and oil production increases, their economy is growing and there's more opportunities for trade. So in regard to Nigeria's media system and media freedom, they're partly free with a score of 51 out of 100. So they have a vibrant and varied media landscape that openly criticizes the government. So they have pretty high media freedom. Journalists risk prosecution under the Cybercrimes Act, and the fear of prosecution, harassment, or attack encourages journalists to self-censor, but no official censorship body. So the government doesn't censor what journalists can say, so there's a high degree of media freedom in that respect. But journalists fear getting attacked by other just regular Nigerian citizens for the things that they say, and so there's a lot of self-censorship. So in that regard, it's not a very free media landscape. So now a little bit on their literacy rates and technological development. The literacy rates in Nigeria are currently at 66%, so more than half, and their media penetration for traditional media is that radio is their main source of information, but TV penetration is growing, and a lot of the print and broadcast outlets are owned by the government. So because of that, online outlets are growing in penetration in Nigeria. Internet penetration is 47.4%, and the percentage of households with internet access is 15.23%. So both of those numbers are less than half. So the majority of Nigeria doesn't have access to the internet or, at all. So now to take a look at Nigeria in the context of Hofstede's cultural dimensions. For power distance, they have a very high score, which means that people accept hierarchical order in which everybody has a place and which needs no further justification. It reflects inherent inequalities in their culture. It shows that centralization is popular, subordinates expect to be told what to do, and the ideal boss is a benevolent autocrat. For individualism, they score pretty low, which means that they have a collectivist society. They have close long-term commitment to the member group, which is family, extended family, and other relationships. Loyalty is paramount in their culture. Everyone takes responsibility for fellow members of their group, and all decisions are relationship-based. So, for instance, if you're applying for a job, employers look at your in-group, your morals, as their main criteria. For masculinity, they score 60, so it's a masculine society. They're motivated by their desire to be the best, not by liking what you do. It's more competitive than it is emotional. People live to work. There's an emphasis on equity, so it's all about getting ahead. They are decisive and assertive, and conflicts are resolved by fights, so whoever can come out on top. Uncertainty avoidance, they had an intermediate score of 55, which shows no preference. So the country doesn't lean toward trying to control the future or just letting the future run its course. They don't seem to really mind either way. There's not a sway. For long-term versus short-term orientation, they have a normative culture, which means that they prefer to maintain time-honored traditions and norms while viewing societal change with suspicion. They have a strong concern with establishing the absolute truth. They have great respect for traditions, small propensity to save for the future, and they focus on achieving quick results. So they're very short-term oriented. And as far as indulgence, they score really high with 84. So it shows that they're a very indulgent culture. They follow their impulses with regard to enjoying life and having fun. They have positive attitude. They're optimistic. And they place a higher degree of importance on leisure time, act as they please, and spend money as they wish. So very emotional society in that regard. The two main audiences of this campaign were primarily the mass media, so Nigerian and international media, and active external broadcasts, because mainly their reputation was being tarnished in the media, so that was what they wanted to target. And that dispenses information to the rest of the world, so targeting the media would kind of get their message across most effectively. Secondary audience was the community, so the specific oil-producing areas, the larger Nigerian community leaders, and then eventually the world community. The demographics and psychographics of this audience in Nigeria, 62.15% of the population is 24 years old or younger, so it's a very young population. The median age is 18.4 years old. And then in regard to gender, there's 1.04 males for every female. For psychographics, the mass media were very critical of state and local government, and they focused on human rights. So even though Shell's main downfall was their environmental destruction, they focused more on human rights. So that was kind of their bent. The community saw violence as the answer. Anytime there would be an accident with Shell, local Nigerians would come and attack in a violent way, and they operated from the mindset that their land must be protected and that these foreigners weren't welcome, so they had to do whatever it takes to protect their land.
So overall, the campaign, Shell was viewed as insensitive. At first, they did not take the blame for the environmental issues in the community in Nigeria, and however, due to those unpopular opinions the community had of Shell, they realized they had to take action. So they began to take community action to regain ties with the people. Their impact objectives were to establish and reestablish better dialogue with the local oil-producing communities in order to stem further problems. They used opinion leaders and community leaders as a bridge for dialogue. They boosted spending on both environmental and social or community projects, and they lobbied the federal government to introduce economic reform, including privatization, in order to ease the economic despair of the affected communities. Their output objectives were to gain positive international media coverage of its efforts to boost social and environmental spending in the oil-producing communities through use of international media, speeches and interviews and press conferences, and use of Shell's website and the company's special reports and bulletins. Secondly, they wanted to gain positive national media coverage of its efforts to reestablish dialogue with the community through use of press releases, speeches and interviews, and use of Shell's progress reports. So a timetable. So pre-campaign, there was a lot of issues that went on with Shell and the community that eventually led to the need for Shell to take community action. So on November 1st, 1990, the Utes attacked a Shell rig and a flow station in the tiny community in River State. March 7th, 1992, armed men attacked Shell's rig camp and flow station at Ahia. January 1993, Ken Saro-Wiwa organized Rally in Ogoniland, where more than 300,000 Ogonis protested against Shell. In August 1993, several died in an ethnic conflict between Ogonis and Adonis. In October 1993, false fire alarm called in from Shell's flow station at Koro. December 4th, 1993, crisis erupted in Nembe Creek. And in May 1994, 4 Ogoni leaders who previously criticized Saro-Wiwa were murdered. So obviously Shell had to take action because these events brought a very damaging reputation and image of Shell to the people in Nigeria. So for the campaign, from March to October 1996, they implemented press releases. They provided the media with regular press releases on its efforts in the communities. They headlined such as Shell rebuilds hospital, Shell joins venture to reduce gas flaring in Nigeria, to help the community show the public how its relationship with the communities have evolved. Shell also used press releases and its websites to respond rapidly to its critics, even as it worked to improve its image. Shell took journalists on tours of some of its community projects in the Niger Delta. Shell sent its public relations team on a whirlwind tour of major European and North American cities to tell their own side of the story. The executives were interviewed on CNN, BBC, and CBC. Shell's community relations officers, sometimes accompanied by top officials, had 23,000 meetings with opinion leaders in 1996, compared to 1,300 meetings in 1995. Shell's top executives met with influential Nigerian organizations such as the River State Foundation, a U.S.-based nonprofit whose members come from the oil-producing communities. And Shell's 1996 community report provided detailed information on Shell's contribution to the oil-producing communities in healthcare, vocational training, education, agriculture, and community achievements. From February to July 1997, Shell initiated a youth training program in Ogoniland, which also received medical benefits. Other communities benefited from scholarships and potable water schemes. Shell's group managing director, Phil Watts, spoke at the 4th African-American Summit in Harare, Zimbabwe, on how multinationals can help in economic development, human development, and environmental sustainability. So the overall campaign's theme and key messages are: Shell is a company that tries to balance business with active citizenship and work in partnership on community activities. Shell is a company whose business activities and decisions do not deliberately infringe on the community's basic human rights or affect their environment. Shell is a law-abiding, non-political, and non-sectarian company that listens to its publics. So these are their actions they took. At the height of the crisis, Shell took journalists to some of the villages that had benefited from its community efforts. They doubled its community assistance budget to approximately $40 million and replaced or buried old flow lines. They aggressively promoted itself as committed to no political interference in the communities in which it operates. They established community liaison officers and launched websites. And they propagated Shell's story in 1996 annual report. These are the media channels they used. 1995, this campaign took place. It was before social media, so they used paid, owned, and earned traditional media. They used speeches, press releases, interviews, the Shell website, special reports and bulletins, and Shell's progress reports. Now, the way they implemented this is through traditional media. They had media press releases, and they were such as Shell rebuilds hospital, Shell joint venture to reduce gas flaring in Nigeria, Shell helps youth find jobs, Shell helps Ogoni Hospital. Company show rebuilds public how its relationship with community evolved. Press releases and website to respond rapidly to its critics, even as it worked to improve its image. So they implemented this traditionally, sent out press releases, created their website. In evaluating this campaign, they established a better dialogue with oil-producing communities through press releases, meetings with opinion leaders, its website forum, and community reports. They boosted spending on both environmental and community projects by $40 million. Shell's community relations officers, sometimes accompanied by officials, had those meetings with opinion leaders that granted in over 20,000 more meetings than the year before. Shell initiated a youth training program in Ogoniland where it also received medical benefits. Other communities benefited from scholarships and potable water schemes. So they accomplished the objectives of improving communication with communities, influencing the government through opinion leaders, and contributing to the local economy. In the circuit of culture, Shell decided to represent the community in Nigeria. They identified as Shell's role in the crisis in Nigeria and what they could do to have a better reputation in the community. They achieved consumption by using press releases, websites, and community projects. They produced this because of reputation management and crisis management in the community, and they regulated it through community relations. Overall, Shell decided to implement this campaign to maintain its image. Its focus was crisis and reputation management. They used community efforts to try to relate to the community and try to sympathize with the people in the community. However, their campaign was unsustainable because currently, in a news report even from a week ago, Nigeria and the community is still suffering from the events in the 1990s. Shell is still viewed as negatively in the community. So overall, this campaign was not successful. And if Shell wants to have a better reputation or image in this community, it needs to figure out a sustainable way to increase its reputation in the country by truly caring about the issues going on instead of just trying to maintain its image. So thank you so much for watching. Here are the references. Thank you.